Every character, location, or experience you've read about in my crime fiction novels holds a piece of reality. I'm Helen Taylor. Welcome to the story behind my stories, the video podcast where crime fiction meets my authentic experience. Here, we delve into the real-life inspirations and intimate stories that shaped my novels. Discover how my everyday encounters, adventures, and travels translate into tales as gripping as they are genuine. The story behind my stories goes behind the words on the page to reveal the backstory that inspires my writing. Hit follow or subscribe and ensure you're part of this journey. Morning! I missed last week. It was the launch of A Lower Goodbye. Last week we left, or the last episode, we left talking about the fact that the pony trekking into the jungle hadn't taken off. And so I was writing tie-dye. And I've almost come to the end of what I can tell you about when I was there and writing and what I've incorporated into the book. But I can't leave it there without talking about the full moon party. Now, Paul had told me about the full moon party from day one. He was an avid goer. But as we know, he does like to partake in a little smoke. Now, the full moon party was every month at the full moon, and you could tell when I was living there in Charm Beach, the approach. From about a week before, you'd start getting a few more people coming. And from about 3 or 4 days before, Charm would properly start filling up. And by 2 days before, Charm would be full. You had very little chance of finding somewhere to stay on the island that was anywhere close to Hadrian, let alone that little bit further out towards Tonsillar. Because people came from everywhere. You know, as I've said, it was a backpacker island. People were travelling all over Asia and then on to Australia, etc. They worked their travel itinerary around being on Koh Phangan for the full moon party. And so it happened every month. It was a massive tourist income for everybody that ran businesses on Koh Phangan. So, you know, it was a big income draw. As they were a backpacker island, they tended to only have backpackers who weren't the biggest spenders. Cheapest way they could do it, obviously, because they're travelling. So the full moon party brought in a few more people for sure, but also more income because those people weren't necessarily just travelling around and needing to keep to such tight budget. So it affected everybody, from the people owning and renting out rooms or resorts to all the taxi drivers, and not just on that one night of the full moon, but before and after. All of the ferry boats, whether they were the ones from Surrey or Koh Samui, they ran speedboats across, which were much more expensive because obviously they can't hold as many people, to the party and then back to Koh Samui late at night. So there were tens of thousands of people came to the full moon party, whether they came for the day and night and left again, came for a few days before and a few days after, or lived on the island, or were there on the island for a while, and popped to the full moon party. They, as I say, brought in, a massive income, and at Charm every month you saw this little routine, and they'd have more staff helping Dewey in the kitchen. Piet could be run off his feet, back and forth, driving the taxi, and Liam was there obviously all the time, and all the little bit things, like more food was sold, more drinks were sold, and so I don't know if I've fully mentioned Lek. Obviously she was Mug's wife, but we'd become very good friends, and she'd be busy and often actually went to Suratani for the full moon. It wasn't really the place for kids. So I think I mentioned previously that I arrived on New Year's Eve, and that had a big party in Hadrian, obviously a New Year's Eve party like anywhere else in the world, but it wasn't a full moon party, and I didn't go to that. And I'd been there for a full moon party in the September, when I'd gone out before I came home and gave up my job. So then the first one I was there for after that odd one in September was the January 2003 full moon party. And then I was there for February, March, the whole year. And right towards the very climax of the book, Goodwin goes to the full moon party. So I'm just going to read you that snippet now, and then it might be a bit bitty because I have to avoid some of the important bits. So there were people everywhere, some laid out on the floor of the road, narrowly escaping being run over by motorbikes dodging around them. Others sat on the roadside, sipping through straws from metal buckets. They're the buckets that I told you about previously. Intermingled with the drunken, drug-induced crowd were ties holding signs reading "Taxi," and asking everyone and anyone if they wanted a taxi and where to. This was the meeting place for people who wanted a ride home and those offering them. Standing in the middle of Chicken Corner, Goodwin had no idea where he should go or where to look. Thousands of people crowded all around him. He remembered from his reading that it seemed the place to be was the beach. On tiptoes, trying to see above the moving sea of heads, he thought he should walk toward the beach from here. That was where the mass of bodies was going to and coming from. He struggled his way through the bright and scantily clad throng of people towards the beach. Reaching the beach, the noise was deafening. Looking along the beach, all he could see were bodies. Moving ones dancing to the sounds booming out of the bars, or to their own imagined kind of music. Sleeping ones, whether from choice or alcohol or drug-induced, it was difficult to tell. Still more danced on the tables positioned out on the beach or in the bars, while some sat around them drinking from buckets, smoking definite illegal substances. He could smell the marijuana, or ganja as the Thais called it, whatever it was they were smoking, mingled with the stale stench of alcohol-loaded sweat. Flashes appeared at spaces along the beach that Goodwin made out as being fire handlers, swinging rods of fire over their heads and around their sweat-glistening bodies. Poe twirlers doing the same, rings of fire that young people at the peak of enjoyment of their evening flung themselves through with the hope they wouldn't burn alive. As he moved along the beach, the smell of petrol became the overwhelming essence. Cans of it dotted along the sand for use by the fire fiends. Several men stood behind some fire throwers, back to them pointing out to the sea. Goodwin realised they were relieving themselves of their excess body fluids. He was at the Cactus Club now. He'd heard the volleyball crowd mention it as they'd geared up for the party earlier in the day. He stepped over the legs of a sleeping couple, realising as he did so they were not sleeping, but fumbling beneath each other's clothes in a drink-induced slow motion, all effort too much. He pushed through into the club now, close enough to distinguish the actual music being pumped out by this particular bar, rather than the constant noise heard anywhere else induced by the Doppler effect. Here, the obligatory "I Will Survive" by Gloria Gaynor was rousing all the women to stand on the bar, tables, benches, to strut their stuff and proclaim their independence from the male of the species. The music changed to "It's Raining Men," keeping the women and their whoops of joy where they were now, only this time encouraging the men to give them a choice worth making. I'll leave it there because the rest reveals a little bit too much. So you can get a little feel for it there. And I was there for 13 full moon parties and I didn't go to a single one. It was not my thing. I drink, I enjoy a drink. I'm not into the drugs, and I think being that a little bit older than most of the people there, I knew there was too much risk, too much danger. Not danger, but I don't know. It wasn't my thing, and I didn't go. So I had to come up with a way of writing that because it was the perfect climax for the book. So to say that I never went to a full moon party is 100% true. I never did go to a full moon party, but I did go to Hadrian on a normal Saturday night out, and it was a similar experience. There was all the fire eaters on the beach. The music was blaring out from every bar. There were a lot of people around. The taxis were there to take you home, etc. To be fair, it was probably most nights of the week, but obviously a bit more at the weekend. It's because anybody who was working during the week and had the time off at the weekend, anywhere in the world, Friday and Saturday nights are more popular for going out. So I did go several Saturday nights to properly experience Hadrian. And Paul had said to me, as he went to every full moon party, he must have been at about 25 or 30 when I first went out there that year. And he had said to me, this is what it's like on a full moon party, but imagine it with 20,000 more people. So when I was there, I very keenly watched for all those little snippets of the couple laying on the floor, the people all around narrowly being missed by motorbikes out by where the taxis were, people, being drunk, doing the fire walk, jumping through fire hoops, all the fire eaters, music pounding, all the different coloured plastic and metal buckets and the mixes of drinks that people had. And I just took all of that in, massively took all of that in, and I enjoyed it on the odd Saturday night that I went with my crowd of friends and what we did. But I never went on a full moon party. So when I came time to write that bit in the book, I literally did take all those snippets and blow them up and just imagine the whole experience I'd had on an odd Saturday night as being with thousands more people there, and that there'd be other quirks and things. And obviously I was in the middle of something for Goodwin as well, to add into that. And Paul was the first person to read tie-dye, and he read tie-dye as soon as I had finished. And the bit I was the most concerned about him reading, or about being authentic in the book, was the full moon party, because I hadn't directly experienced it. Now that may sound odd, because authors don't directly experience a lot in their books, particularly if they're, wholly out of the realms of reality sort of thing. But it is important for me to be authentic in some of the experiences I talk about in the book. And so I really wanted that to get the essence of a full moon party over any other night in Hadrian. So I was really worried about him reading that bit of the book. But Paul loved it. Paul loved it from day one, and he felt it was very authentic. And when I specifically asked him about the full moon party, he said you would never ever know that you'd never been, because he knew obviously I'd never been, but he said you wouldn't know. He felt that the whole experience that Goodwin had at the full moon party was accurately reflected what it was and what it was like. So I was really pleased with that. And so that was really the end of my writing of tie-dye in Thailand. It culminates at the full moon party, and having that reinforcement that it actually accurately reflected it was really important to me, but also quite a relief that I had managed to capture that. And then since then, the reviews on Amazon and other feedback that I've had of people who've been to Koh Phangan or read the book when they were there has been really, 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 really positive. I was offered a publishing contract when I was in Thailand from a Bangkok publishing house, but they wanted exclusive. They wanted it to only be available in Asia, so I turned that down because I wanted to sell it back here when I came home. So that is, those other people that have reviewed it that have been to Koh Phangan, all say that I have captured Thailand, Koh Phangan, and the experience there really well. So I do really hope everybody enjoys it and they feel like they're there. Some recent feedback I had from somebody who'd only just come to know that I was an author and bought tie-dye and read it was, even from the first bit when you get on the boat, She said, you just know when you're reading it, you've been there. It's not make-believe. It's not embellished. You just get the sense of how real it is. So that's my aim for tie-dye and everything I've written since, to give that authentic experience in the locations that my books are set in. And whilst I never went to a full moon party, and I feel quite proud to say, I lived on Koh Phangan for a year and I never went to a full moon party, because that is and was, what it was famous for. You only went to Koh Phangan to go to a full moon party. You'd go to Koh Tao to go diving. You'd go to Koh Samui for the luxury. You went over to the other side of Thailand for the sort of touristy areas. You go to Bangkok for whatever. You go to Chiang Mai for walking and etc. Koh Phangan, you go for the full moon party. And I was there for 13 and I never went to a single one. Thanks for listening, and next week we'll do that roundup one where I just add an extra telling you about Wat Khao Tum and where else I travelled at the end of that year. So I'll see you next week and we'll go into that. Thanks for listening. Bye.